Hello and welcome to the next episode of Coffee and Comebacks. And today I'm really thrilled to say we've got Geoff McDonald joining us. If you Google Geoff McDonald, he comes straight to the top of the list. And what you will find out about Geoff is that he is a powerful keynote speaker. He will work with businesses, individuals and teams as a business transformation advisor, a mental health campaigner that has a proven record of having such a positive impact when it comes to working not only with organizations, but helping organizations and individuals remove the stigma around mental health and well-being. Geoff is a former executive of Unilever, and we'll touch on Geoff's time at Unilever, no doubt. But before I steal any more Geoff's thunder, I'd like to hand over to you, Geoff, just to share with us an introduction into you and who you are for the purpose of our listeners.
Oh, thank you, Samantha, and thanks for having me today. I mean, you make me sound like a bit of a superstar. Google and my name, Google and my name comes to the top of the list. I mean, you know what? I'm just an ordinary guy who's trying to do something with my own lived experience of anxiety-fueled depression. So, you know, back in 2008, I got very, very sick with anxiety-fueled depression. And the only thing that kept me alive in my darkest moments was my ability to talk about my illness, and in so doing, receive the most wonderful outpouring of the two most powerful emotions in the world. The one is called love, and the other one is called hope. And, you know, in my darkest moments, just knowing that I was loved and that there was a sense of hope that I could get better, they were probably the most powerful ingredients in my recovery. And then in 2012, I lost a very good friend to suicide. And, you know, the night he died, I just thought to myself, what's the difference between him and I? And I came to a very simple conclusion. And that was I'd been able to ask for some help. He was an alpha male. There's no ways he could have the conversation. And instead, he died by suicide. And he didn't have that chance to experience a sense of love, a sense of hope. And that was really the catalyst for me, which led me to co-lead a piece of work in Unilever for about 18 months around breaking stigma. And I saw some amazing results from that work. And I then decided to leave Unilever and go out into the world fueled by a very deep sense of purpose. And that is to try and create workplaces, family groups, friendship groups, where every single person in that setting feels that they genuinely have the choice to just put their hand up and ask for some help if they are struggling with a common form of mental ill health. That could be depression, it could be anxiety, it could be bipolar. So yeah, just trying to do some good with that lived experience, I suppose.
Yeah, and that lived experience piece is so crucial, isn't it? Where we're able to share with others how we've honestly been feeling or are feeling, because that's what starts to remove the stigma. That's what starts to break down the barrier and show that it's okay to be vulnerable. And as you say, that's when you then get the positive love, hope, support, because often we don't give out those signs if there is an issue, because we try to put on that front that everything's okay. And as I've heard you speak about previously in other conversations, you know, around impacts, or very well having these initiatives, for example, in organizations. And I like to say it's not just workplaces, but if we take workplaces, you know, there are lots more initiatives, particularly post-pandemic. But actually, until you break down those barriers and that stigma and people share honest experiences, then actually we're still going to come up with the same problems. And I'd love to just share this quote from your website, from Paul Pullman, who was the CEO of Unilever at the time when you, as you say, decided to move on from Unilever in 2014. You are indeed the biggest champion of our organisation's purpose and well-being. Thank you for all you have done for this great institution. We will benefit from it for years to come. And I just love the benefit for years to come element, that impact, that, you know, the ripple effect that no doubt your work at Unilever had. So where do we focus today, Geoff? What I love about you know, our conversations is that they can go anywhere, and I'm sure, you know, we'll go off into lots of different directions today, which is brilliant, and I'm sure will prove to be really interesting, exciting for our listeners. But where do we start? Which life event would you really like to focus on in terms of, you know, your biggest challenges and lessons that you've taken from them?
Yeah, I suppose, you know, I mean, as difficult as it is to in some ways admit this, I mean, the biggest life event for me must have been, you know, the 25th of January 2008, midnight, the night before my daughter's 13th birthday, and I get woken up with a massive, massive panic attack. And that panic attack is the last straw that breaks the camel's back, which leads me to a doctor, which leads me to be diagnosed with anxiety-fueled depression. And you know, of course, getting married and having kids are wonderful life events for all of us. But I think my breakdown was in many ways my breakthrough in life. And I think, you know, being able to talk about my illness, as I said earlier, being able to experience that sense of love and hope, which helped me to get better. And then, you know, the loss of a friend and feeling a sense of injustice. You know, I really felt that this wasn't fair, that here I was 4 years after my crucible moment, flourishing in many ways, learning every single day what to do with myself to maintain my recovery as somebody who is susceptible to anxiety-fueled depression. I'm susceptible to it, so I work hard. It's going to be the lesson I'll share with you. And he's gone, and I just thought, it's such an injustice. It's so unfair, you know. And I'm not saying that had he been able to talk, he would definitely be alive today, but there's a tiny, tiny chance that he would be. And I suppose that was the, you know, that, as I say, was the real catalyst. And you know, I suppose, you know, the biggest lesson that I've learned over this period, and it's unfortunate that it took a crucible moment in my life, is that the most valuable thing that I have in my life is my well-being, is my health. There's nothing more valuable than me staying healthy. Because if I'm not healthy, I can't be a good father, I can't be a good colleague, I can't be a good husband. And so, you know, I dedicate 60 to 90 minutes every single day of my life to protect the most valuable thing that I have in my life. And I think that's probably been the biggest lesson for me. Yes, there are lots of lessons around how to address stigma, and I'm sure we'll chat about that as we get into the conversation. But at a personal level, you know, one, realizing, and this is not my saying, this is Charles Mackesy, who says, asking for help is not giving up, it's refusing to give up. And secondly, protecting the most valuable thing that you've got in your life, which is your health, are probably the two biggest lessons for me.
No, I absolutely, you know, it's such a reframe, isn't it? Protecting the most important thing to every single, you know, because without life, you know, the other option is we're not here. As you've alluded to, and it's how we protect that and see it in a different way rather than something that's selfish or something that's negative because I need to look better, I need to lose weight, I need to do all those things. It's about reframing it. So this is something I have to do. You know, it's a bit like if we equate it to a car, isn't it? You have to look after a car, you have to take it in for its annual service, you have to do all those things. And if you don't, well, your car will break down. And it's you know, interesting that you say your breakdown was your breakthrough, which I'm sure at the time it didn't feel like that. But as you say, looking back and the journey that you've been on. So would it be okay to stay back there for a moment in terms of at the time of the breakdown and actually before? Because I don't know about you, and you know, I've seen people in the workplaces, I've had my own difficult times myself, I've seen it around me, and often there are signs before that certainly that we might see in ourselves, even if others don't. And I guess I'm interested, did you feel like there were signs that you were maybe ignoring or that you were aware of, that you were moving to this stage of an eventual panic attack and breakdown, or was it very sudden?
No, it wasn't sudden, there were signs, but I was oblivious to them. So it's only now that I reflect and I think back to the period before that panic attack. There absolutely were signs. But you know, Samantha, I often say, I think it was my mother who taught me dental hygiene. And, you know, she said, brush your teeth of a morning and brush your teeth when you go to bed at night. And my teeth haven't fallen out. Nobody ever taught me some mental hygiene. Not my mother, not my father, not at school. And I wish I had been taught some of that, because I think I would have then recognized some of the signs that were suggesting that I was going from being stressed to distressed. And when I think about it today, at a level of principle, you know what was the biggest sign? Was my normal behavior was no longer normal. So the way in which Geoff would show up, he just wasn't showing up in that way. And yes, of course, we have days where we don't show up like we normally do. And we might have a week where we don't show up like we normally do. But for me, it was for a period of at least 4 or 5 weeks when I was just not showing up as Geoff McDonald. You know, I wasn't this kind of energetic individual. I wasn't this father who, you know, wanted to spend time with the kids. I wasn't this individual who wanted to jump on his mountain bike on a Saturday morning and go for a ride with his mates. I wasn't this individual who wanted to do something of a Friday evening and go out and looked forward to stuff. I had these feelings of, I'd wake up of a morning just feeling anxious, and I just thought, I'm a bit stressed. You know, I lost a considerable amount of weight because I couldn't eat breakfast and I couldn't eat lunch. And so, you know, those were some of the kind of physical and emotional symptoms. But at a level of principle, I wish I had been more self-aware of what is my normal behavior, and beginning to realize that, you know what, this isn't the normal Geoff, and there's something going on now, and you need to think about, or, you know, talk to somebody. And people often ask me that. They say, so what are some of the symptoms we should be looking out for? And I say, you know, everybody's different, and this gets manifested in different ways. But the one thing that you can be assured for anybody that you need to get in tune with is be in tune with your subordinates, your peers, your families, your friends' normal behavior. And if you notice a shift in that normal behavior and it persists for 3 or 4 weeks, it persists, you're not the good old Samantha that I know. And it's been like that for the last 3 or 4 weeks. That is definitely worth a conversation. That's definitely worth you, in terms of your own self-awareness, kind of saying, hey, you know what? Maybe I should just go and have a chat to a doctor and just see what's going on.
I love that piece around self-awareness. So just being aware in yourself, as you say, that the children always laugh at me when I use the term equilibrium. And sometimes I use a term, they'll do something, I'll say, I don't know what it is, but it's really upsetting my equilibrium. And they laugh at it. But the point I'm trying to make is, for me, that thing that they're doing or saying is just, it doesn't fit well with me, and it makes me feel stressed or annoyed or whatever it is. And it's knowing, you know, people call it lots of different things, that they call their energy, where they sort of sit, or just their mood, or whatever it might be. But I know certain things will upset that for me, and I have much more of awareness now that I have those feelings. And actually, you're not a robot, so you will still have those feelings. It's more about how you respond to those feelings. Do you respond to those feelings, exacerbate them, and allow the negative thoughts to take over, and therefore negative actions? Or do you go, okay, it's perfectly normal to have this feeling right now, and now I just need to focus in on whatever it might be in terms of the positive piece.
That's so cool. That's so cool. I mean, that's so cool. And you know what? It is about that. And you know, sometimes, and I know I sound stereotype, but guys, we're not very good at getting in touch with those feelings and recognizing and accepting those feelings. You know, I'll never forget my cognitive behavioral therapist saying to me, Geoff, you know, when you're having a really bad day, just welcome that feeling into you like you would a friend into your home. It's just, it's a feeling, it's there for a while, it'll go away. But you know, I think as guys, we just don't connect and admit, I think, some of those feelings, and feel that we can then share some of that with others because of the stereotypes around men, and you got to be strong and all this crap.
Yeah, and then actually that filters through into so from, you know, I was in obviously a male dominated environment, being in the military, then moving into financial services, and at a senior level it tends to be dominated again by men. And what happens then is that women tend to feel like, well, because it's not the done thing to speak about how we, you know, or I might be the only woman in a room or whatever it might be, you then take on that, well, I can't show that I'm struggling with this, or that this is impacting me, and you almost start to become more masculine. And I see that all the time. And then when you start to strip back and go, you know what, I'm going to show my vulnerabilities and air how I'm feeling, that can often then come back and bite you, because it's not the norm to other people around you. And it's trying to strike a real balance, isn't it? I don't know if you've seen that in organizations.
Absolutely. I always. And but I think, you know, the valuable point that you brought across in just that brief conversation is this bit around self-awareness, and you know, for people who are listening to this, in particular guys, you know, become more aware of how you're feeling, and confront those feelings and deal with those feelings, and be more accepting of those feelings, and know that it's normal and it's okay to feel that way.
And I think the self, I'm just underlining it as we sort of, that's really key, isn't it? Because self-talk is so crucial. I was listening to a statistic the other day, and it said humans have an average of about 90,000 thoughts a day, and that by nature 60% of those will have some form of negative connotation, and that some people get stuck in the negative and all these thoughts that go round. And thoughts aren't facts, they're exactly that, they're thoughts. But I love this analogy of skiing toward a tree, you'll hit a tree. So if you just focus on those negative thoughts and those negative things, they will happen inevitably most of the time, or you'll drive negative things to happen because you're focusing on the tree, not on going down the slope. Yeah, if you say, yeah, okay, they're just thoughts, like you say, just accept them, then actually you can move into a different space. And that self-talk, you know, this is the question I guess I would ask you. If your friend had said to you, I really need some help, this is how I'm feeling, how do I work through this? I'm pretty sure that you wouldn't have said, oh, man up, or all those typical things, that you would have been there. Yet to yourself, and often to themselves, men will say that to themselves. They won't speak to themselves like they would their friend.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
Yeah. So moving on from the sort of, as you say, self-awareness and self-talk, what would you say were the biggest challenges that you then overcome to move yourself into this positive space, and what things had the biggest impact on that?
So Sam, I think, you know, one of the biggest challenges was acceptance. You know, just accepting that I was ill with anxiety-fueled depression. I mean, come on, Geoff McDonald, what? Depression? No, come on. You know, so there was this kind of this, and I'll never, ever forget the night. I'll never forget it. I mean, you know, I just came to a point where I just thought, you know what? You, Geoff, have to take accountability for getting yourself better. You have to take accountability for getting yourself better. And Samantha, I remember it was pouring with rain. It was, I don't know, it was around middle of February 2008. It was dark. It was about 6 o'clock at night. And I just put a pair of running shoes on and I went out for a run. And I think that in many ways was the turning point for me. But it was a challenge. It was a challenge to come to that form of acceptance that, you know, I was ill, I was going to be out of work for a good 3 months, but I had to take accountability I had to take accountability to get myself better. Nobody was. I had to get disciplined about going to the cognitive behavioral therapist and doing some of the stuff that he, the skills and the things that he taught me. And at that, and so that acceptance was a big challenge. For me.
And that accountability piece, it feels like we, going back to the South, that the biggest message that you're sort of sharing here is that it is always down to yourself. You can have people around you, you have support, all those things that will help you get to those spaces. But actually it comes down to how you protect yourself, how you talk to yourself, how you are self-aware around what's normal behavior and what isn't. And that whole message of it's down to you and yourself and how you love yourself. And that will then take you through into much more of a positive space.
And you have choice. You can, as you say, continue to spiral towards the tree, or you can make another choice, which is that you're going to seek help, and you're going to work very hard at recovering and maintaining some of your recovery.
Yeah, and as you said earlier, I'm refusing to give up.
Yeah, asking for help is not giving up. It's refusing to give up. Men out there, listen to that. Asking for help is not giving up. It's refusing to give up. And I can tell you, when Federer or Nadal or Serena Williams wins a trophy at Wimbledon, the first person or people that they turn to is their box. And they say, thank you for your help. I couldn't have done it on my own. And we grow up in this kind of, particularly in the corporate world, there's this sort of, this kind of, you can't ask for help and you got to know all the answers. And as the line manager or as the leader, you got to deliver and provide all the answers to everybody. And you can't. I remember when we first introduced coaching. Oh, no. Oh, I don't want to coach. It's a sign of weakness to have a coach. Well, I'm sorry. Federer turns to his coach and says, thank you for helping me win Wimbledon. I couldn't have done it on my own,
Exactly. Great analogy. Now, I'm getting the feeling that you might like tennis, but just because you mentioned
I don't like that. No, I like sports and I'm useless at tennis.
Oh, me too. But it sort of leads us into the coffee break questions around some of your personal interests and the things that you like. And I always like to ask the same 3 questions to our guests, and we always get some great nuggets from it. So it's okay with you. We'll go into the sort of coffee break round, if you like, and put you on the spot. This is probably the hardest question, by the way. Everybody struggles with this question. You might be okay, but what is your all-time favorite film and why?
It's probably Schindler's List. And it's just the sacrifice and the humanity that comes through in that list. I mean, in that movie, the sense of humanity and how this individual just puts all biases aside and just does what I think most of us as human beings want to do, and is do good in the world. I think we have an innate desire to do good. But unfortunately that gets, I don't know, something happens as we grow up and we get older and we get influenced. But so I think it was just the humanness, the wonderful humanness and the sense of acceptance that means that Schindler's List is probably at the top for me.
Yeah, it's an incredibly powerful film, isn't it? Gives me goosebumps just thinking about it. What about books? So do you read or listen to books? Or both?
Yeah, I'm not very good. I don't do much reading. I prefer listening to a podcast, or maybe I'll do an audio book.
So what would you recommend? Do you have a recent one that you've listened to?
Well, I'll tell you what I recommend. I'll tell you, in terms of podcasts, Rich Roll. But you've got to have time to listen to Rich Roll, because most of his podcasts are about 60 to 90 minutes. So you've got to be out on a very long walk or a long run, or but I really enjoy his podcasts, because it's all about well, first of all, and by the way, I think you are great at what you're doing, because you've done the research and he does the same. I mean, he's done all his research. He asks the right kind of questions. And it tends to be, you know, he talks about stuff around health, longevity, and how we can just all live far better lives, far better lives. So I really enjoy him. And then I'm just a bit of a geek when it comes to politics. You know, I just love politics, and I've just suddenly realized maybe I'm a bit of a royalist as well, because, you know, with the death of the Queen, I mean, I've been glued to the TV. I just I'm finding all this ritual and, you know, everything that's going on between the monarch and the constitution and the politics, and I find it's just been fascinating. It's been fascinating. And so public affairs and political podcasts, you know, I listen to The Guardian, etc. But as a book, you know what I loved is The Salt Path. I don't know if you've come across The Salt Path, but it's about this couple who end up being homeless, and they walk the Southwest Coast Path. And it's her journey and what happens to them as this couple. He, as the husband, is very, very ill. He's lost his job. She's also jobless, and they are homeless, and they walk the Southwest Coast Path. And again, a bit like Schindler's List, the best of humanity comes out as they walk those 630 miles from Cornwall to Poole.
Wow, that's on the reading list. That sounds heartwarming. And actually, going briefly back to everything that's happening now, as you say, we're in the sort of state of mourning and leading up to the Queen's funeral. And obviously, on one hand, it will bring out some emotions, I think, for some people around death and funerals and all those sorts of things. But also, I'm with you. I think, again, it brings people together, you know, through challenges. People can come together, you know, ex-military. And I've got some friends involved in key, you know, somebody that's involved in flying the plane back from Edinburgh today, someone that's in London living there for 10 days because she's very senior in the military and is part of coordinating everything. And, you know, there's a bit of me that wishes I could be part of that as somebody that served for the Queen. But actually last week we had ex-forces event on the day that it was announced. As we were walking in, it was announced.
Oh, wow.
And there were so many fitting tributes, about 2,000 people in the room in London. And, you know, some would have met her, some wouldn't. But, you know, there was just that, it was united grief. You know, it's that whole feeling of somebody and something so impactful. And do you know what you hear about her now? It's not all the wealth. It's not all the things that it's about how she made people feel. Exactly. And she made people feel like they counted, like they were loved. And, you know, I think that's what it comes down to. It goes back to what's going to go on our headstone. It's not what rank we reached, it's how we made people feel. Very powerful. So what's an interesting fact that most people won't know about you? I love this one because you never know what's going to come out.
Sure. An interesting fact, I'm Jewish. But I ended up being a Christian because my dad, who was Jewish, died when I was very, very young. And then my mum remarried and I was adopted, and she was Catholic and she brought me up as a Catholic. But ultimately, I'm Jewish.
And do people around you know that? Is that something that
no, not really. No.
Oh, thank you for sharing. And sorry to hear about your father and all those. Thanks for sharing that, Geoff. So thanks for the coffee break questions. I always love just getting an insight, and as always other things come out, but it'd be great to just go back to your story. And as we sort of move through into what you're doing now, and as you said before, you know, there are a number of different things that you're doing, huge campaigner and advocate, and just being, you know, you've got a number of initiatives and projects that you're involved in, and maybe you could give us an insight into some of those. But actually it'd be great to just hear your career story to date, and sort of just give us some milestones in terms of an understanding of your career.
Okay. So I mean I started my career as a teacher many years ago. My teaching subjects were maths and biology to sort of A-level students, and teaching was maximum effort for minimum return financially. So I thought I'd look for somewhere that was minimum effort for maximum return, and I kind of stumbled on Unilever. Although teaching was minimum effort for maximum emotional return, because I honestly believe in the Pygmalion effect. If you just tell kids they are fantastic and they are great at biology and great at maths, they will be great. So I didn't have to do too much teaching. I just had to tell them how good they were at the subjects. But I left teaching and I joined Unilever in the South African business back in around about 89. And then I had a wonderful 25 years with Unilever. 8 years in the South African business, 5.5 years here in London, looking after Africa, Middle East, and Turkey from an HR point of view. Then off to Australasia, out in Sydney for about 3 years, kind of doing an Australasian HR role, and then back into the UK to do a leadership and talent role, and then looked after our home care business globally. And then ultimately, my final job was looking after all of our marketing, communications, and sustainability efforts around the Unilever world. And that's when I worked very closely with Paul Pullman and Keith Weed in rediscovering Unilever's purpose and beginning to embed that and really live it out into the organization, which really was a major vehicle that we used to transform Unilever and enhance the performance of that business. And when I kind of saw how purpose had such an amazing impact on the performance of Unilever, I kind of thought, well, imagine if I could do that for myself. And so I sort of left with a very deep sense of purpose around, as I said earlier, trying to help organizations, workplaces, and family groups and friendship groups to genuinely feel they can just put their hand up and ask for some help. And Samantha, somebody once said that having a sense of purpose in your life will take you to people and it'll take you to places you could never, ever imagine. And, when somebody once told me that, I kind of thought that they were, I don't know, they were some sort of spiritual guru out there that I kind of didn't really connect with. And you know what? In the last 9 years, that's exactly what has happened to me. It's exactly what has happened to me. A sense of purpose has taken me to people and to places I could never, ever have imagined. I've just been so fortunate, and the journey has been a journey of provocation, of inspiration, huge reward from individuals who have heard my stories and have made significant changes in their personal lives as a result of it. And the narrative in the early years was all around helping these organizations, provoking, inspiring these organizations to go away and address the stigma of mental ill health. But, since COVID, I've really moved to trying to help organizations and leadership teams and executives to elevate the health and the well-being of their people to being one of the strategic priorities in the boardroom, not in the health and safety function, not in the HR function, but in the boardroom, that we have the health and well-being of our people as a strategic imperative. And helping organizations, executive teams understand what that looks like, and then how do you go about executing that and providing a bit of advice and guidance in the execution of that. And I often ask the question, I say, what I've noticed in the last 9 years is that the most limiting resource that I see in workplaces today is the energy of people. People are frazzled. They are frazzled. And energy is the most critical enabler of our performance. When we are energized, when we are passionate about something, when we're in full flow, wow, we can perform. I detest Liverpool Football Club, but I can tell you, I don't know where they've come from, that team. But they found this German and they parachuted him in, and he brought energy and passion, and just look what's happened. And we all know when we work with people that are energized and passionate, we can move mountains. And we can't be energized if we are not healthy. And so therefore, if the energy and the health of your people is such an enabler of performance, tell me, Mrs. CEO or Mr. CEO, why is the health and energy and well-being of your people not a strategic imperative if it's such a critical enabler of performance? So I suppose that's where the narrative has shifted to, and the work that I'm now doing in helping organizations really, really move this to that level of conversation in the boardroom. And then finally, I co-founded a charity called Minds at Work. It's very dear to me. I'm a trustee on that charity, and we really are trying to shift the charity to begin to provide mental health support to the sort of SME sector, small, medium-sized enterprises, because these big companies, they've got no excuse. They better get on with it. They've got the resources, they've got the people. But where does a business that's got 50 people, where does that CEO, where does he or she turn to address some of these issues and really begin to create a workplace which truly enhances the lives of every single employee?
And what I'm hearing there is something that I believe is part of the challenge, which is, I think a lot of organizations and teams will now understand the why, as in, why should we be, looking after our people as our number one asset? But it's the how. And I see so many organizations, big and small, that just don't know how. And then they think, oh, well, we can create, we now give them, I don't know, their birthday off, or, we give them, we've got mental health first aiders or whatever it might be. But then their decisions aren't made with the best interests of people. And therefore, unless it's embedded in decision making, the way that you treat people in your culture, then actually, so it's that how, isn't it? And it like you say, sometimes it needs an outsider and a coach to come in to get alongside them to show them how and hold their hand, if you like, to get the how right.
And Samantha, that how has got to be, how do we shift the culture of this organization? This is not, how do I run the best well-being week, all right, and care for you for 1 week of the year and then flog you to death for the other 51 weeks of the year? Or how do I make sure that there are some lovely bananas next to the till in the canteen and we're going to keep them fresh? That's not the how. It's how do we shift the culture of this organization? I often say, imagine an employee value proposition which says, come and work for our organization. You know why? Because we'll enhance your life. We'll enhance it. I can tell you, most workplaces I go into, people's lives are diminished by going to work. It's so sad. And they shouldn't be diminished. Work gives you a sense of purpose. It gives you routine, gives you the opportunity to build relationships with people. You feel part of a community. It should be so life enhancing. So it's about the culture of the organization. And sometimes what I see happening out there right now is companies are doing well-being to their people. You know what? They're doing well-being. I'll give you an app. So go and sort your stuff out. I'll give you this app. Go and meditate for three times a day and sort yourself out. Without saying, no, don't give me that app. If the ways of working in the organization, if the leadership behaviors in the organization, if there's still stigma, is not also being addressed. So as organizations, we've also got to look at ourselves as an organization and say, our ways of working, our leadership behaviors, have we got a measure? Are we measuring the well-being of our people? Let's change some of that stuff, systems, policies, and processes. And then, yes, we'll also offer resources. So there's a degree of individual and organizational accountability, which ultimately leads to a shift in the culture of the organization. And this doesn't happen overnight. It's not a week called the well-being week.
No. And it comes back to the self-awareness piece, doesn't it? The awareness on an individual level, but also how you're operating as a team, how you're leading your people, the challenges that you're seeing around you. And it's not having the blinkers on. It's being in touch with, it's that whole temperature check, isn't it? Temperature check of the team, of the business, how people are feeling. And I think too often that's the bit that's missed, and that's the most critical element. Yeah.
But your use of the word culture is so important, because this is about a transformation of the culture of the organization. This is not about a well-being week, or an app that we're going to give all our employees and tick the box to say that we now care for them.
Yeah,
or
100%.
Tell them we've got an EAP program, now go and use it. Yes, those are all good things, and they must be in place. But you've also got to attend to the way in which we behave and do things around the organization.
People listening today, there'll be something I think that everybody can take from our conversation today, and I've really enjoyed it. And to be quite frank, don't want it to end, but we do need to end the conversation. So, and I love to end on a high, and the high I would love to end on for you and for our listeners is what you feel your greatest achievement is with all the work that you've done through the years. Is there something you could put your finger on to share with us?
I tell you what, I don't know whether it's an achievement, but it's probably the most impactful moment that I've had in the last 9 years as I've been doing this work workplaces. And it was after a speech that I'd done, and I don't know, Sam, if you've ever come across these things called a word cloud. But
yes.
you know a word cloud. So you do your thing, and then you get the audience to put up some words around how they felt at the end of the session. And if boring is the most common word that is stuck into the computer, then boring comes up as the biggest word in the word cloud. All right. So hopefully everybody who's listening to us kind of knows what a word cloud is. And so this word cloud comes up, and in the bottom right-hand corner wasn't a word, but it was a sentence. And the sentence said, "I've now decided I'm not going to end it." That was the most impactful moment I've had in the 9 years that I've been on this journey. And whether that's an achievement or it just had a huge impact on me, that for me is that's why I do what I do. That's why I do what I do. It's about saving a life. And if I can just save one, or if I can just help one person to breathe a little bit easier after they've listened to you and I today, then I think this podcast that you and I have just had is a huge success.
Wow, I think that's a great way to sum up. It's heartwarming, it's touching, and it comes back to the point that you said right at the start, is that you want to be able to make a difference in the lives of others. And I genuinely believe that you do. And even in this short, as you say, conversation, that there'll be something for others to take away. So thanks again for your time, Geoff. I've really enjoyed the conversation. Like I say, I wish, as always, we have more time. But thank you for everything that you've shared. Pleasure. And we look forward to speaking again soon.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sam, and thanks for having me.